And we've seen the questions that have been raised about Sergeant Bergdahl.
The fact that he was a dancer.
The ballerina.
What does that mean?
I'm sick of hearing people saying, well, we always went after our deserters. Throughout much of our history, we did go after deserters. And when we got them, we shot them or hanged them.
He says he was growing his beard because his son was in captivity. Well, your son's out now. You don't have to look like a member of the Taliban. Are you out of razors?
I don't want to complicate your hatred of facial hair there, friend, but my guess is if you gave Bob Bergdahl a bandana and a duck, you'd like him just fine.
Who is Sergeant Bo Bergdahl? That question is now at the heart of a sweeping political fight for how America treats its soldiers and how it treats some of its enemies. The new video released by the Taliban is adding fuel to that fire. Video shows the handoff of 28-year-old Sergeant Bergdahl waiting in a pickup truck for the U.S. military helicopter, being escorted to the waiting Americans who quickly shake hands with the Taliban fighters, and getting checked for weapons and being loaded into that aircraft and to freedom. The Pentagon says there's no reason to doubt the authenticity of that video. And this morning, Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes told reporters what's on the video wasn't surprising. He said, quote, "We didn't tape the video to release ourselves, but this was a very transparent exchange, carefully negotiated, so it went off without surprises in terms of how it was executed." The video, though, has left Americans with a lot more questions than answers. The White House insists it couldn't wait to notify Congress in advance because Bergdahl was in danger. His health so deteriorated that Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel said the move would, quote, essentially save his life. What do you think, looking at this video? And then there's the vividness of seeing the man, some say, abandoned his fellow troops. Just moments ago, Army Specialist Joshua Cornelison said just that to Tamron Hall. Take a listen.
I mean, he was a good soldier at the same time. I mean, he always wanted to learn more. He always wanted to know everything we were doing, how all of our battle drills. He studied and studied and studied, and he didn't just want to know how. He wanted to know why we did these things. Why do we do this? How do we do this? And why do we do that? And as a team leader, it was actually very refreshing to have a soldier who was that committed to the job that we were about to go do in Afghanistan.
He absolutely 100% deserted his post without any shadow of a doubt. He intentionally left his duty station in our OP.
Two different perspectives, deserter or not. And should it matter to the decision whether to bring home one of our soldiers? Joining me now via Skype is Sergeant Matt Vierkant, who actually served alongside Sergeant Bergdahl in Afghanistan. Thank you so much for joining, sir. When you see that video of Sergeant Bergdahl and his release, what goes through your mind?
Thanks for having me. I actually haven't seen the video, so I don't know.
Well, so he's getting handed off, and you see these Taliban fighters. I mean, when you see the images of Sergeant Bergdahl in general, what does it conjure for you as someone who has memories of him?
Mostly of anger and resentment.
Because you feel that he abandoned his post and he should not have.
I know he abandoned us and deserted.
And many who served with him agree with that sentiment. What do you think that should have as an effect on the negotiation process for a soldier's release? Should it change things at all if someone deserts?
It should completely change things if somebody's a deserter or if they're just captured, especially when you're exchanging other prisoners that we're holding, bad prisoners, for somebody who was a deserter. Making that exchange, it makes all the difference in the world.
And this has ignited so much sort of partisan furor. Republicans saying various things, Democrats saying other things. Everyone's weighing in. Do you feel that the story of these soldiers in Afghanistan is being used as a political football?
Well, what I'm trying to do and what my buddies are trying to do has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with getting the facts out, getting the true story out there for the public, for America to hear for themselves. It has nothing to do with left-wing, right-wing. Politics have nothing to do with it.
And when you say you want to get the true story out, tell us more about that. What do you recall about Sergeant Bergdahl? What kind of a man was he during that brief period when he was serving?
Well, he was actually only in country with us for a brief period of time. He deployed late, was probably only in country for maybe a month, a little over a month before he walked off. Quiet guy, kept to himself, studied, trained. Not a bad soldier, but still it doesn't take away from him leaving his weapon and equipment and walking off.
And what about this other element of his release, that there was a trade of sorts? The White House is being very careful not to say a trade. They're saying a transfer. But 5 Guantanamo Bay senior Taliban leaders were released to secure Bergdahl's freedom. How does that make you feel? And do you worry that that puts a price on the heads of other servicemen and women?
It does anger me. I fear it does set a bad precedence. And I don't think it should have been... I don't think the exchange should have been taking place in the first place with everything surrounding Bergdahl right now. The questions of why he did it and what happened while he was in captivity. There's too many questions just to exchange prisoners like that.
And if you could say one thing to the president about this, what would it be?
To open up an investigation, look back at all of the sworn statements that my platoon wrote, other people wrote, because the same thing that we wrote on that piece of paper and everybody else wrote that day and the days after it happened is the same exact thing that we're saying right now today.
Sergeant Vierkant, thank you for your time and thank you for your service.
Thank you.
For better or worse, this has become a deeply political fight. Some of the soldiers are rallying against that, but people on the Hill seem slow to drop it. Joining me to weigh in are Karen Finney, former communications director at the DNC and host of Disrupt, of course, here on MSNBC, and John Feary, a Republican strategist and president of Quinn Gillespie Communications. Thank you both for being here. Karen, I'll start with you. With all these suspicions about Sergeant Bergdahl, but also about his family, about his father, whose alleged tweets are getting some blowback for being possibly sympathetic to the Taliban, some critics are saying, was the Rose Garden Conference announcing this release a bad move? Should the president have been photographed hugging this family, announcing this triumphantly?
Well, I think it depends on how you feel about what happened. If you believe that in the idea that we don't leave anyone behind, no man, no woman behind, and that this was a successful effort to get him back, his parents obviously very happy to have him home, then yes, that is appropriate. I think certainly there are questions, and I do think that the White House probably should have been a little bit better prepared for some of the questions that would come out, because obviously we're having, multiple discussions about not just questioning the president's decision, but also questions about Beau himself. And so I think they should have been maybe a little bit better prepared for that.
And John, some Republicans have been comparing this to Benghazi. There's been a lot of railing against the kind of soldier that Sergeant Bergdahl was and saying that that makes this transfer more inappropriate. But deserter or not, he is a soldier. Do Republicans levying those critiques run the risk of appearing to denigrate our troops?
Well, I think that Republicans have to be careful, because I think we have to all be happy that we've got Bergdahl back in the States. I think that we've got to say, hey, listen, we're glad we got this guy back. I think you can question the trade, though. I think that the fact that you traded 5 high-value Taliban strategists who are, as the president himself has said, have probably a pretty good chance of being recidivists who are going to wage jihad against America again, you have to ask yourself, was this the right trade? And then the other question is, was the Obama administration competent? I mean, they went out initially and said this guy was a hero when they should have known that he abandoned his post, which brings up so much anger from the troops themselves. And I think the anger from the troops themselves is kind of the most significant part of this. They're mad. They're mad that they're saying that this guy is some sort of hero when he clearly was not.
And the information was out there, right? Karen, going back to that Michael Hastings piece in 2012.
It absolutely was. But again, I think there's a couple things we need to remember. And you know this, having been at the State Department, and I know this, having been at the White House. We don't, as the public, have all the information that the president and the national security team has, and that the Department of Defense has. So we're trying to judge this from the outside without the benefit of all the information. I think that's an important point to make. And I do think it's important that we let Mr. Bergdahl, I want to hear Beau Bergdahl's side of what happened. We're hearing from, the men who serve with him. That's important. But let's hear from him before we decide to convict him, before we decide what should happen to him. Let's find out his side of the story.
I think a lot of people are eager to, and obviously he faces a tough recovery to make that possible. John, I want to get your reaction, so stick around, both of you, because actually we're going to have you weigh in on everything we're coming up with next, including